The words of Ecclesiastes. A season is set for everything. Time for every experience under heaven. Time for dancing and a time for wailing. Time for birthing and a time for dying. Time for speaking and a time for silence. Time for seeking and a time for losing. Time of mourning is a complicated one, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Les's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. Mizmor LeDavid Adonai Roi Lo Achsar Binot Deshi Abitzeni Al Mei Menichot and Haleni Nafshi Yeshvev Yancheni V'Magalei Tzedek L'Ma'an Shemo Gam Ki Elech V'Gates Amaved Lo Ira Ki Ata Imadi Shiftacham Shentachai Emai Nachumuni Ta'aroch Lefanai Shochan Neged Sorai Yishanta V'Shemen Rashi Kosi Ravaya Ach Tov V'Chasid Yerdefuni Ko Yemei Chayai V'Shafti B'Veit Adonai La'orach Yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. You've anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kerachem av abanim, richam Adonai al yiraav, ki hu yada yatzreinu. Zachor ki afar anachnu, enosh kechatzir yamav katzitz hasadeh ken yatzitz. Ki ruach be'arabo ve'anenu ve'lo yakra'enu od mekamo. V'chesed Adonai me'olam ve'adolam al yira'av. V'tzid kato livnei vanim. As a father has compassion for his children, Adonai has compassion for those who show reverence. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. The days of mortals are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. The wind passes over them and they are no more. And no one can recognize where they grew. But Adonai's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children, to all the reverent ones, endures age after age, unchanging. This coming Shabbat, we read Parshat Balak. This Torah portion, which the Moabite king Balak hires a soothsayer, Bilam, to curse the Israelites. Bilam informs Balak that this is not possible. God, the God of Israel, will not allow it. But Balak insists that Bilam has no choice but to set out to do the wrong deed. God sends a series of roadblocks to prevent this from happening. And in the end, Bilam, of course, ends up not cursing, but blessing the Israelites. One of the aspects of the blessing that he states is the famous line from the beginning of the Shachri, from the beginning of our morning service, Matovo alecha Yaakov mishkanetecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. I once had a rabbi who explained on the beginning of Bereshit, on the beginning of Genesis, that the word tov should not just be translated as good, but complete as well. So if we understand the word tov in this way, Bilam's blessing to the Jewish people is a recognition of the fact that our homes are not only good, but complete as well. And what is it that truly completes a home? What is it that is the glue that makes it stick together to be whole? That, of course, is simply love. the love of family members that we share with each other, especially the love of two spouses, or the love of a father of his children, the love of grandchildren, and even a great-grandchild. And of course, all of this describes Les to a T. He made his home not only good, but complete with love, the love that he had for his family. And despite all of the things that he did in his life, it was his family that meant so much to him. And he would do whatever he could for them. Yes, he dearly missed his wife Phyllis, who passed away 13 years ago. And he kept in touch with all of his family, even his extended family. About 1800 years ago in Mishnah Pirkei Avot, we are taught that Shammai said that we should always receive others in a pleasant way. Again, this was true about Les. He understood it explicitly. And this was what made him successful not only in his love of family, but in his job as well, in building relationships with his colleagues that were less like friendships, and as I believe a number of you know, more like family. He was good-natured, I understand, told great stories. And in Mishnah Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Levitas taught of Yavne that a person should also be humble. Despite all of his achievements, this described Les as well. Yes, he took pride in what he accomplished, but he downplayed all of the accolades. Quite frankly, he was much more proud of his family's achievements than his own. Mishnah Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma teaches that a person should be sameach bechelko, happy with what they have. Also, this aptly describes Les. He never regretted what he did, was always happy with what he had. Well, not the most observant person of Jewish law amongst the Jewish people. He certainly had a very strong Jewish identity. Came from a family of labor Zionists, was a strong supporter of Israel, and in fact was at once fluent in Yiddish, which was his first language. Today we are going to have the opportunity to make sure that Les remains with us, not only in our minds, but most importantly, in our hearts as well. By speaking of his attributes, speaking of his achievements, we'll begin this process by calling on some members of his family. And so I'd like to ask Lisa and Miriam to step forward at this moment to share words with us.
Years may come, years may go. Some go fast, some go slow. Some are good, some are bad. For each one, thank the Lord, we have been just be glad together through the years. This is from a song the Irish Rovers sang, Years may come, years may go. How does one summarize and share the importance of another's life? It perhaps can be done best today for our dad, through sharing some of the memories, the moments, and the stories that make our dad's life unique and special. In the days, weeks, and years ahead, the continued retelling of these memories and stories will convey certain aspects of the essence of our dad's life and the legacy of the lessons we have learned from him, to those who knew him and to future generations who won't have that privilege. The cast of characters in our father's stories include a spy, a renowned author, iconic performers in the music and entertainment industry, business executives, and politicians. The locations for the stories of his life are equally exotic and include crisscrossing the planet to such places as the Cannes Film Festival, world fairs in Japan and Spain, the equator, and crossing the Arctic Circle, to name just a few. The plotline of his story includes catching a 6-foot striped marlin, participating in a successful case argued at the Supreme Court of Canada, receiving an acknowledgement for his involvement in the Juno Awards, having a wall full of gold and platinum Irish Rover records, and managing the Irish Rovers, whose television show sometimes had higher ratings than CBC's highest-rated show, Hockey Night in Canada. As impressive as the list of personalities, locations, and events are, however, it was his family that held the spotlight for him, and it was his home that he liked best. His hard work and the choices he made were always with his family in mind. To support his beloved wife, Phyllis, Zichona Livracha, or Phil, as she was known, to raise and educate his daughters, and to provide a good life for his family. Starting life as Eliyahu, or Eli for short, in Montreal, Dad was born to immigrant parents who had recently moved to Canada with his 2 older siblings, Tamar and Emmanuel, or Manny, as he was then known. His father, Fischel, was a Hebrew school teacher, and his mother, Miriam, avant-garde for her time, ran an inn in the Laurentians while raising her family. While important to his parents that he learn English and French as the local languages, they spoke Yiddish in the home, and Dad spoke it fluently. As children, we thought that was the secret language all parents spoke when they wanted to speak privately. Dad attended Baron-Bing High School and counted Mordechai Richler as a good friend. You'll find our dad immortalized as a character on the pages of several of his illustrious author's books, sometimes as himself and sometimes as a fictional character. While attending Baron-Bing High School, Dad was an active member of the YWHA water polo team, and during the summers, he worked as a waiter at his mother's pension at Lac Romand in the Laurentians. After graduating from high school, Dad went to Loyola College before it became part of Concordia for a short time before realizing that organic chemistry was not his life's ambition. Beginning as an usher at a review theater, he was soon promoted to assistant manager. A job with Columbia Pictures, bringing the film from city to city, landed Dad in Calgary, where he eventually found his way into advertising. It was through one of his clients, Phil's Pancake House, that he met Will Miller, a young Irish musician. He helped Will land a gig hosting a children's TV show called Just for Fun at CFCN TV. When Will and his brother George formed the Irish Rovers, Dad became their personal manager, guiding their career for the next 30 years. Most importantly, not long after he settled in Calgary, Dad was set up on a date with Phyllis Winton. A dietitian from Saskatoon who was staying with her sister. No less than 3 separate couples wanted to fix them up. Obviously, this was meant to be. They were married on March 29, 1962, and soon settled in their home on Colleen Avenue in Calgary's Chinook neighborhood. They allegedly discussed having 6 children, but over the next 6 years, the births of their daughters, Lisa, Miriam, and Shauna, completed the family. The success of the Irish Rovers led to a 7-year weekly, half-hour variety series on CBC following the Beachcombers on Sunday nights. As the series was taped at CBC Vancouver, Les moved us there in 1972. His work in the entertainment industry grew. The popularity of the Irish Rovers led to more and more tours with Dad on the road much of the time. His artist management extended beyond the Irish Rovers. He managed Dame Vera Lynn's North American appearances and worked with Haggard Hardy and Frank Mills, among others. In the early days of Bryan Adams' career, another impresario asked if Dad could listen to Bryan Adams' demo record and consider managing him. We don't know why he didn't, but we still have that demo album. Leona Boyd, known as the First Lady of Guitar, randomly showed up at our door one day looking for Dad. Miriam, not knowing who she was, said, "He's not here right now, but can I tell him who's looking for him, and I'll give him the message." His reach in the entertainment world continued to executive producing television specials and one movie called Second Wind. In addition to the artists he managed and shows he was involved in, he also helped shape the industry with his participation and leadership in key organizations. He was involved in numerous organizations, including the Performing Rights Organization of Canada and the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, the entity that oversees the Juno Awards. His work in the entertainment industry took a sharp turn to the hospitality industry when he, along with the Rovers, developed a series of Irish pubs in several cities. One of the biggest was developed for Expo 86 in Vancouver and was so successful, the leadership of Expo 86 asked him to run 5 other restaurants on the Expo site. After Expo was over, he engaged in one more restaurant venture for several years before taking his final occupational turn in the direction of investing. He spent many years exploring and investing in novel and often tech-based companies. While the work in these diverse fields was fulfilling, it was the people he met along the way who were most important to him. Many business associates who he met along the way became lifelong friends, some of them whom are here today. Dad was proudly Jewish and a staunch supporter of Israel. He grew up in a traditional Jewish and strongly Zionist home. His older sister Tamar and her husband David, affectionately called Doodle, were very involved in the labor Zionist movement. His older brother Manny changed his name to Lucas Vongard after a period of time serving in the Israeli Mossad during the establishment of the State of Israel. As for Dad, he was on the board of the National Bicentenary of Canadian Jewry Committee. He was honored by the State of Israel bonds for involvement in the Israel bond drive and was a lifelong generous supporter, giving tzedakah, charity, to numerous Jewish and Israeli organizations. How could we describe Dad? Some of the many qualities that would define him were his intellect, independence, and ability to connect with others. He was bright and had a particular head for numbers. He recalled when he was tasked with getting the cash for payroll in one of his early jobs. For the young folks here, there was no such thing as e-transfers or direct deposit at that time. He enjoyed calculating this in his head, specifically how many $5 and $10 bills, etc., that he needed to get from the bank to be able to give out the entire payroll. Even less than 3 days before he died, he was sitting at his computer calculating the bills he would be paying and checking on his investments. While personal computers only became common when he was already in his mid-60s, he quickly learned to use them and stayed fairly current on technology use. He enjoyed crossword puzzles and word games, playing Duo Trigordle daily. For those of you who don't know, that's 32 boards of Wordle going at the same time. Again, these were activities he was doing up to a couple of weeks before he passed away. He was fiercely self-reliant and independent. He was truly a self-made man, and without an occupational safety net, he worked very hard and relied on his intellect, skills, and grit to succeed. As he had more age-related health challenges in the last couple of years, he remained stoically insistent on being independent. While we worried about his insistence on staying in his own home and managing his own needs, we also understood his drive to live this way. We also understood that his drive to live this way contributed to his longevity. Also contributing to his longevity was his active lifestyle. From the water polo team in high school, to early morning jogs, to the racquetball and squash courts, right up until his early 80s, until eventually, when that wasn't possible, he worked out at the local gym 5 to 6 times a week. When COVID ended that for him, he got a stationary bike and learned some exercises and worked out at home. Even when the bike was no longer possible, he tried to do some exercises several times a week. He always believed his activity helped keep him alive and independent. Dad was a very charming man who made fast connections with people. Despite constantly being in social situations during much of his career, he didn't love large social gatherings, and especially if there was any attention focused on him. He did, however, find great meaning in the individual connections he made over his entire life. People enjoyed talking to him and found him interesting, although he privately and humbly would question why he'd be of interest to them. He dearly loved his friends, staying connected to many of them until the end of his life. Our parents' home was often referred to as Les Weinstein, hosted many friends and family over the years, both for dinner parties and a place to stay when visiting Vancouver. It was only in later years that us girls appreciated that Dame Vera Lynn doesn't show up at just anyone's house for dinner.
While not a religiously observant man, he was a man who lived by Torah values. He treated others with kindness, strived for justice and fairness in his work and relationships, and acted with respect towards others. Fittingly, from Pirkei Avot, the Jewish text, which means the ethics of our fathers, we can learn much about how to live an ethical life, just as we have much to learn from the lessons of how our father lived. Pirkei Avot teaches that the greatest crown one can wear is the crown of a good name, or good character. A good character can neither be bought nor faked, but is earned through lived values. His humility was remarkable. He never wanted to be the focus of attention or receive recognition for his many achievements. I'm sure he would think it unnecessary that we're taking this opportunity today to share his successes and accolades. He took pride in his work and accomplishments, but didn't need recognition or attention from others for them. Even though he had interesting stories to share and fascinating experiences to recount, he was concerned he would bore people, when in fact he was a great raconteur and people very much enjoyed listening to him and his wisdom. He was generous in many ways. He provided a very good life for his family. We had a lovely home, a private Jewish elementary education, nice vacations, and combined between the three of us many years of university. This was all underwritten by his hard work, his desire to do everything he could for his family, and his generosity. He was also generous through charitable contributions. But his generosity extended beyond this. I recall him telling us he was stepping down from a prestigious committee as it was time to give others an opportunity to succeed. I recall Dad describing to me how he was giving one of his assistants a good bonus. This was when I worked in the office with him. And he said, if people work for you and do a good job, they need to be acknowledged and rewarded. After his success at Expo 86, managing the 6 restaurants, he took his management team on a trip to Hawaii as a thank you and for their hard work. He often stated that his successes were because of the people he worked with. He was also generous with his time, often giving advice to hopeful artists early in their careers. He was often asked to listen to demo tapes, read scripts, and meet with people in the industry seeking advice. He did so enthusiastically many times over his career, even though he had no vested interest in many of the endeavors and careers of these individuals. He wasn't looking to represent them or be involved in their projects, simply to help them. In addition to his generosity, he had the ability to be content with what he had and not covet what others had, as described by the rabbi. As a teen, I had a part-time job tracking his stock investments on a spreadsheet. There was one particular stock he purchased for $1 and sold when it reached $16. I continued to track that stock, although he no longer owned it or needed me to, because I was fascinated by the growth of the stock. It was the biggest gain I had seen in any of the investments of his that I followed. It ultimately reached $31, and I asked Dad if he was upset at how much more he could have made. And he said, I can't be greedy. I did very well in this stock, and I'm satisfied with how I did. I did not understand that as a 15-year-old, but it's a lesson I've never forgotten, and it has certainly influenced me. Central in our dad's life was the primacy of family. Our mother was the love of his life, not only until she passed away 1 month before their 50th anniversary, but in the years after as well. He had a picture of her in every room, even in the walk-in closet, and would constantly sing her praises. His love and support for his daughters was shown in so many ways. When Lisa showed an interest in working in the entertainment business, he gave her an opportunity to work on one of his shows, more than one. Dad canceled his participation in a very important tour to be able to attend my high school graduation, noting with a smile it was the first month in 20 years that he hadn't traveled. Shauna recalls when he hired her to help in the office, he insisted she be paid fairly and taught her how to write and submit an invoice for the work she had done. And what more can you say about a man who buys his girls a pony? Yes, he bought us Diamond, a Shetland pony that we'd drive for over an hour on many Sundays to a farm miles away to be able to ride Diamond. Our dad fostered independence in us, encouraging us to travel and live and study in other places. But while he encouraged independence, he was always there to support and help us. He loved his sons-in-law very much. He was so appreciative not only of the help Michael, Lisa's husband, provided, but his willingness to do so. He came to love Yossi, my husband, very much, always asking if Yossi didn't happen to be on a call when I was talking to him, "How's my Yossi doing?" He loved Michael, Zichrono Livracha, my late husband, and along with our mom was a great support to my children and I when Michael passed away. He loved his 6 grandchildren and took an interest in what they were up to. He wanted to know what they were studying, what work they were doing, and what their interests were. He welcomed his grandchildren's partners and saw Yisrael and Sarah married on Zoom during COVID, was looking forward to Shira and Francesco's upcoming wedding next month, and was looking forward to meeting Danny's boyfriend, Jaden, around the time of the wedding. He was blessed to meet his first great-grandchild, David, and was excited about the upcoming birth of his second great-grandchild in a month. This was not in the version that I gave you. I'm adding this in. Lisa and Michael, your care for Dad during his health challenges in the last year was exemplary. He was immensely grateful for your help, as are Shauna and I. He lived a good life, and we were privileged to have him as our father. As Dame Vera Lynn said in her most famous song, "We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again." As it is said in Midrash Rabbah, Bereshit, the righteous, even in death, are called alive because their deeds and teaching live on. Tehei nishmatot tzrura b'tzror ha'chaim. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life.
You going to read something in a bit? And Danny goes next, and are you reading something? You said you were reading something from someone? Danny, if you'll come up, thank you.
One of the first stories I ever heard about my grandpa involved, coincidentally enough, booking a cross-country Vancouver-Toronto flight in early July. In the summer of 2002, my mom spoke on the phone to her parents as they organized the trip to meet their newest 5th grandchild. In the weeks that followed, as my mom became 9 months and a few days pregnant, much discussion was had over whether or not to move the tickets, weighing such factors like when they should arrive, would there be a bris or a baby naming to account for, and how late this grandchild was going to be. They ultimately kept their original flight scheduled for July 6th, and lo and behold, on July 6, 2002, I was born. You could say I was waiting for my grandparents to arrive in Toronto for me to be born, or for me to arrive into this world, but I think it was just a coincidence. When we see something add up with math that we can't quite understand, we call it a coincidence. Coincidences, like death, can be hard to fully understand and oftentimes unrewarding to try to make sense out of. 23 years later, on Sunday, July 6th, I flew the same journey as my grandparents, but in reverse. Landing in Vancouver, as I've done many times over the years for visits and vacations, bar and bat mitzvahs, a funeral, birthday celebrations, holidays, and breaks from school, I realized that this time would be different. This would be the first time I would arrive in Vancouver and not get to see Grandpa. Rather than looking for an explanation to coincidences or the rationale for our immense loss, in our grief, we instead look for comfort. So I want to take some time to provide comfort the best way I know how to, which is storytelling. I hope that by sharing a few stories about my grandpa, Les Weinstein, you too can find not only comfort, but also find the humor, hard work, and heart, 3 things I will forever associate with him and will remember every time I think about my grandpa, Les. Many of my earliest memories with Grandpa take place in the old house on Salish Drive. These sights and smells and stories are ingrained in my memory. I can't walk past wood-paneled cabinets or a stony exterior or anything unicorn-related without thinking, it's just like Grandma and Grandpa's house. I have this image of him sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and reading the paper, lifting his eyes up from the page when he heard us coming into the room in the morning. I remember as little kids, Teddy, Hannah, and I would wake up at 5 a.m. because we were still on Toronto time, and him and Grandma were often the only two in the house also awake. Because we lived on different coasts, getting to have sleepovers at our grandparents' was a special, multi-day ordeal where we were appropriately spoiled with Grandpa's cuddles and Grandma's sweet treats. They were filled with the quintessential moments between grandparent and grandchild. However, they were unlike most other sleepovers because our parents were also included. So much for what happens at the grandparents stays with the grandparents. Nevertheless, it was both Grandma and Grandpa together that opened their home and their hearts in a way that can only be described as overflowing with love. I have no doubt that many of you here know the feeling I'm describing. Whether the time was spent together over a meal, at their house when they were entertaining, talking business, traveling, giving advice, or just a phone call to say hello, Grandpa took care of the people he loved. I also remember going down to the basement to his office, seeing all the pictures on the wall of the family, the Rovers, and of course, 6 large portraits of each of his grandchildren. I learned very recently that the frames used for these pictures originally held his gold and platinum records from his time working with the Rovers. He repurposed the frames that displayed those achievements to hold pictures of us. He wanted to hang up big pictures of his grandchildren for whom he shept so much nachas. Though Grandpa was often working at his desk, he would always encourage me to play the piano in the room, which hadn't been tuned in years but worked just enough to play some music and make some memories. As I got older, I got to learn more about what Grandpa did while he was working at his computer, as well as about the different jobs he held throughout his life. We grew up hearing many stories about Grandpa's time working in the entertainment industry at the theater in Montreal, Columbia Pictures, and of course, with the Irish Rovers. For Grandpa's 90th birthday, his daughters organized a series of interviews where the grandkids asked him different questions about important topics and themes throughout his life. I, being the resident pop culture nerd, got to ask Grandpa about his time working in and building the foundation for the Canadian entertainment industry. His honorary Juno Award speaks for itself. I loved learning more and more about Grandpa's work, and because Grandpa didn't love being the center of attention, if you wanted to hear a story, you had to ask the right kind of question. And because there are too many stories to tell at once, I'll instead share some of my favorite instances of Grandpa talking about this era of his life. Grandpa once told us about a time where the Irish Rovers got to meet John F. Kennedy, who was himself famously an Irish Catholic, and a fan of their music. My cousin Benjamin asked Grandpa if he got to meet JFK, quote, before or after he was president. We later realized, Benjamin is Australian for the record, so there was a bit of confusion there. We later realized that Grandpa actually meant Robert Kennedy, not John, but still we remembered the whole misunderstanding very fondly. Very recently, I was curious to ask Grandpa what kind of music he listened to back in the day, as he started working with the Rovers around the time that many iconic Canadian artists began their prolific careers. So I asked Grandpa if he liked Joni Mitchell, assuming he would understand that I meant, do you like her music? But instead, Grandpa answered the question, do you like Joni Mitchell, by saying, well, I didn't know her all that well, but she was a very sweet girl with a very lovely voice. I heard her sing at the pubs in Calgary all those years ago, and we ran into each other here and there. Of course, Grandpa has many stories about his years managing Dame Vera Lynn's North American tours, including Vera's specific request that my Grandma Phyllis tag along so that they could shop and have tea together. One of my favorite recent memories with Grandpa was when he mentioned seeing Vera in Cannes for the film festival and staying at her home nearby. When I heard that Grandpa went to the Cannes Film Festival, I imagined he was there to watch films. And so when I asked if he remembers the movies he saw, Grandpa answered, well, we were there promoting our movie, trying to sell it to be distributed in the European markets. The answer was very much in line with how Grandpa would tell a story, casually dropping the most interesting lore as if it was the most basic information. That movie, by the way, is called Second Wind, and it stars Lindsay Wagner, and it has about 5 reviews on Letterboxd, one of which reads, this is a movie no one remembers. I enjoyed it at the time. Grandpa was one of many behind the scenes who played an important role in building the Canadian arts and culture scene. As mentioned, he has a Juno Award for helping establish the awards ceremony as chairman and director of CARIS, the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, among other plaques and certificates recognizing his contribution to an industry that allows artists to share stories through music, movies, television, and live performance. Though it had been many years since Grandpa worked in the industry, that doesn't mean his influence wasn't relevant to younger generations. In fact, a few years ago, when I was an undergrad, my university housemate was playing music on our speakers, and when Wasn't That a Party started playing, I asked, "You know the Irish Rovers?" To which she answered, "Of course, my family loves them. I grew up listening to the Rovers all the time." Needless to say, she was amazed when I told her that my grandpa used to manage the band back in the day. And whenever I would come back to school from visiting Vancouver, she would ask about my coolest grandpa ever. Again, showing how the Rovers brought people together with their music, whether it was a concert in the 70s or in Hamilton, Ontario in 2020, when a Jewish girl from Toronto and a Catholic girl from Orillia bonded over Irish folk music. Grandpa was a reminder of how music can connect between generations. A few years ago, as Grandpa was talking about Vera Lynn during dinner, Hannah and I realized that she was the iconic voice behind many of the wartime songs we learned in middle school to prepare for our Canadian Remembrance Day ceremony. As we sang and tried to dance what we could remember of the choreography to This Is the Army, Mr. Jones, Grandpa joined in, smiling and singing along with us. Though Grandpa socialized with his fair share of celebrities, he treated his friends and family like they too were nothing short of his A-list. He would remember even the smallest details about his grandchildren's hobbies and interests. A few years ago, I told him that I was trying to learn Yiddish using Duolingo, and every year since, his birthday cards to me included a special message wishing me a Freilichen Geburtstag. While many Jewish grandparents encourage their children and their grandchildren to become lawyers, doctors, or accountants, Grandpa championed arts and culture, in addition to business and medicine, of course. He was really proud of us for following whatever passion we choose. He encouraged me to keep writing poetry and playing music, and I would joke that if he still worked in the music business, I could have been a successful Nepo baby. Grandpa was excited when I told him about my plans to continue studying the humanities in graduate school this fall. I wish I got to talk more about literature with him, though I cherish our conversations where I learned about his friendship with Mordechai Richler, who even referenced Grandpa in some of his books about their time growing up together in Montreal. Grandpa and I shared a love of crosswords, sudokus, and any type of word puzzle, and I know that I'll always think about him. It'll be easy every day when I do the daily mini and the daily sudoku. I never got to beat him at a game of Scrabble, but then again, most people couldn't either. Grandpa was fiercely independent, which, as my mom and Lisa noted, sometimes posed a challenge towards the end of his life. Nearly 2 years ago, I visited Vancouver to stay with Grandpa over my reading week break from school. After dinner one night, Grandpa had a fall. He was thankfully okay, but while trying to get back up on his feet, he was honest with me about how this aspect of aging was really difficult and how upsetting it was. I'm not telling this story to make it seem like he had a lot of bad days or complained to his grandchildren, because he did not. In fact, as many will attest to, one of Grandpa's most used phrases these past few years was, "I'm still here, aren't I?" said with a smile and with his distinct voice that blended bluntness and levity. That is why I wanted to share this story, because Grandpa was many things, but a sugar-coater he was not. His honesty was admirable. It isn't easy to tell the truth when it isn't pretty. Grandpa's honesty did make it harder to hear him talk openly and frankly that he was hurting. But his candor also made it even more special to hear him say how lucky he was to have grandkids like us, because you knew he meant it. I want to talk about luck because I associate with Grandpa, and not only because of the numerous elephants, unicorns, and shamrocks seen throughout his apartment, all symbols of good luck in different cultures. As I mentioned before, Grandpa would often remark on what good luck he had. And I don't think he was referring to merely having success in business or good fortune, but he would call himself a very lucky man whenever he spoke about my grandma, their daughters, and their grandchildren. Grandpa loved my grandma Phyllis dearly. Although he spent the last 13 years without her here with us on Earth, he truly honored her memory and kept her spirit alive, keeping portraits of Grandma in every room of his apartment, talking about her, how much he loved her, and the important role she played in all of their stories together throughout their beautiful life. I remember at the celebration for his 90th birthday in 2023, Grandpa, who again didn't love being the center of attention, looked around at all the family there and told us grandkids again how lucky he was and how grateful he was to our grandma for giving him such a beautiful life and a beautiful family. It's true. Grandpa was a lucky man, an honest, hardworking, loving man, And though luck doesn't even begin to describe it, we were lucky too, for getting to spend the time with him that we did. They say less is more, and we had more love, more laughter, more l'chaims, and more life because of Les Weinstein. These stories and these memories I will hold dearly. I'm incredibly grateful to have had my grandpa in my life for as long as I did. And I think what is my favorite memory and what I will miss the most is this. Whenever grandpa would pull us in for a hug, squeeze us extra tight, and pat us on the back, and you could hear him say, I love you so much. I can't tell you this is just one specific instance where he gave me this hug, because this was every hug from Grandpa. Grandpa, we are the luckiest grandkids around because of you. Thank you for your wisdom, your honesty, your stories, your generosity, and your overflowing love. I love you so much. We'll meet again some sunny day.
Shiva Minyanim will take place tonight, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 7:30 at the Ragusan home. And people are also welcome to visit on those days, plus this coming Friday, between 1 to 4 p.m. Please rise for the Amalei Rachamim. Amalei Rachamim shochen b'amromim hamsei menucha nechanatach ekanfei hashchina b'malot kedoshim utrem gizraki amazhirim et nishmat Eliyahu ben Fishel u'Miriam shalach le'olamo b'gan Eden te'ah menuchato Anna barachamim esreba tzata kanfecha le'olamim utzura b'tzrayim et nishmato Adonai hu nechalato v'anuch b'shel mashkavo v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest during your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Les, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. I'd like to ask that the pallbearers step forward at this moment to be followed by the family, to be followed by the rest of us.